Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to introduce my next guest. He's a local TV writer and producer, Michael Poryes, popular for being involved in TV hits just such as the creator of Hanna Montana and That's So Raven, among others. And now he's coming up with this new show called Home Sweet Rome about a girl called Lucy who moves from California to Rome with her dad and stepmom. Thank you for having me. Talk about more this new concept of a girl who is living out of her home country.
Well, I mean, she is living out of her home country, and the reason she did it really was because her widowed dad met and fell in love, and has been kind of miserable after her mom passed away a couple of years ago. And so it's a double-edged sword moving to a new place, especially Rome, when you're leaving all your friends, all your comfort zones. You're just going into middle school. And now you're going to Rome where you're going to go into middle school and you don't know anybody. And so going to Rome is a wonderful thing. Isn't that exciting? But I'm going to miss all my support system back home as I enter probably one of the harder parts of any kid's life, when they turn 12 and 13. And so that becomes a really big challenge and where a lot of the fun is.
Do you bring your own experience in this project, in this specific project, or in general in your projects?
I always bring my own experience. Now, I didn't have the experience of being a 12, 13-year-old girl who moves to Rome. That's not my experience. My experience would come from moving to a new place. Just like a kid might move from this neighborhood to that neighborhood. Same thing applies, really. This is, I'm an American and I'm moving to Rome and I've got a new culture and I've got a new this and I want to make new friends or whatever. It's much bigger, but the essence is I'm going to a place where I don't know anybody and I have to make friends and I need to adjust. So you always get that from your own core. That's what I find works for me. I have to find some way to relate to it, some way where I get that universal truth. So it might sound like, well, how do you come up with a girl moves to Rome? You're not a girl. You've never lived in Rome. That's this big thing out here, but it really boils down to every kid can relate to moving into a new school and not knowing anybody. The same thing applies, right? You're going to meet people in that school from different cultures, different families, different backgrounds, just like she's going to do that in Rome. I just took a small universal truth and made it big.
What is the reason you always choose the girl to represent this world,
Yeah, that's a good question. Personally, I find writing for 12-year-old girls as opposed to 12-year-old boys, right, much more interesting. The reason I find that is 12-year-old girls are much more expressive. You know their emotions. They have closer relationships where they talk about a lot of things. I can tap into that much more than I can tap into a 12-year-old boy who's the opposite of that, which is, I'm not going to talk about my feelings. I'm going to be this or I'm going to be that, and so you have to be clever in how they talk about their feelings, but you're limited, right? You're limited. And so I might explore another project with a boy, but I always go to a girl because I also find, quite honestly, 12-year-old girls are smarter than 12-year-old boys. And so I like to write that. I like to write that side. I'm a very emotional writer who deals with sensitive things and my heart on my sleeve. And so I find the avenue best for me is a girl-centered show. It's always been that for me.
Well, how did you get the attention of a whole new generation into a story of these teenage girls and the world around them? I mean, what is the key to success in these stories?
I mean, when I started The first thing I did was That's So Raven, and it isn't like, oh, I woke up one morning and I said, I'm going to change kids programming. I went into That's So Raven because I was looking for work. And then that was a success, led to Hanna, right? No one knows it's going to do what it did in both of them, especially Hanna. I found that the secret of these kinds of things, at least for me, is relatability. I never write to the moment. I don't write to the trend of the day or the politics of the day. All I write to are the emotional truths of being a kid. And they were the same when I was a kid and when you were a kid, the kids now, and 30 years from now. There's going to be crushes. There's going to be hurt feelings. There's going to be friends that disappoint you. There's going to be trying to fit in. There's going to be not liking yourself. There's going to be making mistakes and not knowing how to say you're sorry. Those have been around forever and ever and ever and ever. And I love to write in those spaces. And I found that that's probably the main reason the series I do stand the test of time, because you can always relate to them. Anybody can relate to them. Parents come to me and say, I related to that story. I remembered that.
Well, yeah. Okay, talking about streaming, I have a question about that. We are living in the streaming era, There is a lot of TV shows coming up every week. I mean, as a creator and a writer,
Hmm.
does that make you're more difficult, have a lot of TV shows? Or is more easily for you?
It's a double-edged sword. When you have more TV shows, you have more opportunity. But on the other end, it isn't quite as special, right? When I did That's So Raven and Hanna, there was Nickelodeon and there was Disney, right? And if you were going to watch them, you better be there at 8 o'clock on Friday, right? Now, there's a lot and you have to find them. And initially, they would release all episodes at the same time, which, as a viewer, I liked. But as a writer wanting the anticipation of somebody watching your show, you've just spent a half year of your life working and somebody just binged it. You want to take a little bit more time. And now I'm noticing streamers are starting to do that, and they're starting to roll out their new shows one a week to try to recreate the anticipation of that. That what used to be in the networks, streamers are now trying to do that again. So again, a double-edged sword. You have more opportunity. There's more programming on one end. On the other end, isn't quite as special. It isn't quite as, oh my God, I better be home by 8 o'clock because I want to watch that. Isn't that exciting? I kind of miss that. And hopefully when streamers start to roll things out one a week, that'll come back a little bit more.
Do you have any other show coming up? Like you have any plan to do any another show?
I don't have any other show other than Rome coming up. I'm always pitching. So I've had meetings at Disney, I've had meetings at Nickelodeon. I talk about this show and that show and that show, but nothing yet. But you always move. You always have new ideas. You never know which one is going to sell, so you better love all your kids, if you know what I mean. But you just keep going and you keep putting it out and putting it out and putting it out. It wasn't like, well, gee, Hanna's over and something I did, Life with Boys in Canada, that's over. I think I'll do Rome now, and that all of a sudden that sells. Rome was probably one of 5 projects that I was trying to place, and that's the one that went. Right? Always have other things. Always don't just rest on one thing. And if you don't get that, if you want to make a living in the entertainment industry, have a few things going at the same time.
Just a last question. I know the first episode of the show was released on April 7 on Canada. When will we on this country will be available on the US and the rest of the countries?
You find out, tell me. I'm not sure. I mean, I know it's going to be rolling out in Europe first, probably Italy, the UK, Germany. As far as when it comes here, it would be on HBO Max, which is now called Max. And they have not told us the date that they're going to premiere it yet. Sooner the better for me, but I don't know.
Well, thank you, Michael, for this interview. Congratulations
My
for
pleasure. My pleasure.
this new show, Home Sweet Rome. Wish you a lot of success and thank you once again.
I appreciate it a lot.